Thank you, Dr. Beeke, for a reminder of this mercy. I was thinking of the law, and even there, we hear about mercy to the thousands of generations, rather than the third or fourth that will receive the withdrawing of it, magnifying God's mercy. And I was thinking, can you spell out a little bit too the connection with covenant and Hesed in particular, but how it's related in the covenant character, and mercy flows from that aspect of who God is, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good, very good. So God's normal way of showing saving mercy is through covenantal dealings with his people. And I don't know if you ever thought about it this way, but there's kind of like a gravitational pull to covenant in actually all his saving mercies. So let me graph it for you if you follow my hand. So here's mom, here's dad. And then there's the covenantal lines. Children are born within the covenantal lines. They need to be born again, but they still receive covenant mercies outwardly. So they're under the prayers of the church. They're getting the teaching of the Word of God. They're getting, hopefully, family worship. And so they're within these covenantal lines. So let's say there's 5 children in the family. We visited a family last night with 5 children. So I'm speaking present tense here. And say this one's saved at the age of 7. Maybe that one is saved at the age of 12. And this one is 17. Maybe another one's not saved until an adult. And maybe the 5th one never gets saved and rejects covenantal mercies and abandons church and truth and breaks out of the covenant, the external covenant completely, and goes his own way. Still, we can say it's God's normal way to show covenant mercies within the family stream. Now, what happens when God takes someone outside of the covenant and just wonderfully converts them, someone who never darkened the doors of a church and so on? Well, what happens to that individual when they get saved is what? Oh, well, they want to meet other people that have the similar beliefs, and they end up in church, and they end up joining a church, and they get mainstreamed into that covenantal stream because God's a covenant-keeping God. So there's always a gravitational pull. And then they get married, and they have kids, but they're in the covenantal stream as well. So God's tendency is to work along covenantal lines, which is a great encouragement to family, a God-fearing family. But God also does take those from outside, but not as commonly. But then he brings them inside. So he's a covenant-keeping God, and that's that covenant character of chesed and faithfulness and loyalty and the very name Yahweh. I am what I am, I was what I was, I shall be what I shall be in my covenant faithfulness. That's all tied in with a special mercy as well.
Any other comments or questions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Personally, I'm okay if some of those people, I think, are wrong theologically, but some of them are well-meaning, and they prefer the word God's common goodness. They prefer the word God's common long-suffering. If they want to use that word, it's okay. What they're saying, especially the Protestant Reform, is that the word grace always refers to saving grace. They won't deny a common mercy in some ways, but there's such a tendency in those circles to see everything in terms of eternity. So, in one sense, we can agree with them that on the eternal day of judgment, the fact that you had breakfast this morning, if you die and go to hell, that breakfast, the clothing you're wearing this morning, the house you dwell in, that will all testify against you because God gave all those things to you and you abused them all and rejected his son. But does that actually mean that this morning it's a curse that you have clothing to wear and food to eat and a house to live in. To me, that's a stretch. And if you look in the Bible, the word grace and the word mercy is often used interchangeably. God is merciful and gracious to all. So to deny common grace, to me, is to deny reality that we see around us every day. But if the word grace is to always be interpreted savingly, I understand where they come up with that position. The problem is they can't defend that, in my opinion, sufficiently from the Bible, because the Bible often uses grace in a common way as well. And so did the Reformers. And so does the confessions, like the Canons of Dort, talking about the offer of grace coming to unsaved people. And I know they have fanciful ways of saying, well, in 17th century language, the word offer there and offer of grace meant something different, but that's a stretch as well. So what the Protestant Reformed were doing, I believe, through Huxema, because there's very few groups that really deny common grace, but what they were doing is they were overreacting to the problem in the Christian Reformed Church in the 1920s, where common grace and saving grace were becoming intermingled. And that's still true today of many Reformed churches that teach that you don't evangelize your children because we presume they're saved. It's in God's common grace they come into the family and they're in the covenant. They don't need to have that circle around their name that I just pointed out with those little X's. When I did my book on bringing the gospel to covenant children, there was a local pastor here, Reformed, fairly conservative actually. My book was like 3 sermons long, and it started to make inroads in his flock. He got quite upset. He never talked to me, but he got quite upset with the content of my book. And he then preached 6 sermons against having to evangelize your children, because he just said, the children are saved. Well, it's over against that mixture of common grace and saving grace. The problem is, this is where it gets really complicated and hard to understand, is that in the Protestant Reformed Church, they have an even stronger view of the salvation of their covenant children. They don't just presume, they declare it is. So in one way, they took away the common grace mixture with the saving grace from the CRC background. In another way, they also don't evangelize their children, which leaves you with a sense of mystery. So those are a few of my thoughts.